is, but welcome everyone. You are in our bi-weekly Art of Resilience speaker series. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Forest Assisted Migration. It's our 2021, it's our second series. It's our second speaker as part of this series this year. This series is a joint effort between the College of St. Scholastica and the University of Minnesota Duluth Sustainability Office to bring together campus and community to explore sustainability and equity in a rapidly changing world. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Erke, the Sustainability Facilitator at the College of St. Scholastica, and I'll hand it off. I think Jana, the sirens are still going off. The other host we have is Jana Corfey, and she is the Sustainability Coordinator for the University of Minnesota Duluth. I'll hand it off to Jana now. I think things are dying down in the noise.
Thanks, Ryan. Totally forgot about that when we scheduled this. So just so folks know, a few housekeeping topics. Today's webinar is being recorded. We'll be able to share the link with you after the event is complete for your reference or to share with others if they might find it useful. We also invite your comments and questions, so put them in the Q&A or the chat, and Ryan and I will hold those to the end for the Q&A session. As for format of today's presentation, our guests are going to be presenting through a slideshow and a few polls for the audience. So we do encourage people to participate in those, and then we'll round up the end of the session today with a Q&A, and hopefully we'll be able to get to as many questions as folks can bring up. But Ryan, you want to introduce our guests?
Yep, definitely. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Joining us today to talk about forest assisted migration are David Boz and Joel Bransky. David Boz and Joel are from the University of Minnesota's Northeast Regional Sustainable Development Partnership. I'm going to hand it off to them. I'm going to let them talk a little bit more about their roles and our talk today. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. So David and Joel, I know you've been working on things behind the scenes. Good to see your screen popping up, David. And you're both muted.
Great. Well, I'm really happy to be here and looking forward to this. This will be somewhat interactive. So we're just going to start, introduce ourselves, and then get you right involved really quickly here. So Joel, you want to tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, I was born here in Duluth, raised here, proud Central grad. You can see there on my hat. Spent a lot of time outside when I was a kid. I got a huge bass there, you can see. Didn't really know what I wanted to do after college, but eventually I landed a job teaching English at a middle school in South Korea. It's a great experience. You're probably wondering, you know, what is a teacher guy doing with a forest project? I don't have a good answer, but it did teach me to think fast on my feet and figure things out as I go, so it's a good experience. Yeah, working here, of course, doing this project, also working with the Land Trust, doing some work with the Northern Food Network, and in my free time, I really like mountain biking, and you can see there I got a great lasagna sandwich, so definitely like eating.
Well, and just a little introduction by myself. My wife and I moved here about 32 years ago, kind of experimenting with sustainable living. We have an off-grid farm, and it's kind of what the fields looked like last summer. And I've been working mostly in the agriculture field, but also energy and natural resources in the soil and water district. But big things I've been working on, I've worked a lot with interns. We've had about 150 farm interns on our farm. I helped start the Victus Aquatic farm in Silver Bay with some UMD professors. Started the Wolf Ridge farm and Agroecology Center. Others are now doing that as I now work for Extension. And so the rest of the time we're going to be talking about one of the projects that we're working on in the Regional Sustainable Development Partnership for Northeast Minnesota. So, but first, we have a quiz for you. What is the 50-year prediction for the Northeast Minnesota forest? I don't know if we can do that poll.
Should be seeing it now.
Give you like 30 seconds. It's not that hard, you know, but it's gonna be tough. We'll see what happens.
Got a couple more people to participate. We're about 86%.
Wow, 86 is good for a poll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, and here
Let's see what
are the results.
All right. Well, most of you got what the current predictions are for 50 years from now. I sure hope both A and D are wrong for sure. So thank you for participating. What we're going to do, though, to start this off is Joel's going to put in the chat the Jamboard link. What we want you to do is spend 5 minutes on this and the next one. The first question is, why is the northern forest dying? And what I'd like you to do is Google, use your phone, talk to someone who's near you. You can put into the Jambox what's going on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Jambox. You have this one and you have this question. What is the solution? How do we fix it? So how many of you are familiar with Jambox? So I'm going to get out of this screen and see if we can, do you want to share your screen for Jambox, Joel? So
Yeah, for sure.
When you get into Jambox, what you'll be looking for is a tab right underneath the arrow. And right in there, if you want to press show a sample, what we want to see, you put your name in, and then what'd you find out? Why is it dying? And then at the top of this page, you'll see there's 3 lines. After 3 panels, there's the last question, which is what can we do to fix it? So in the next 10 minutes, I would like you to figure out what's going on, share your things. And if you don't know, or you can't find it online, what are your questions about it? So maybe 7-8 minutes, let's get some notes in there. Is everyone able to access it?
We won't know because they
We
can't.
won't know. I'll look on Zoom, Jamboard to see.
Should get some music going.
Yeah, that would actually be a good idea. Some forest music.
Okay. Let me work on that for a minute.
You can work on that. Or maybe something with a beat. Well, we've got 27 people in there. Oh, they've got a message that there's too many people on it.
So what I can do is the people who are in there staying there, write what you want. I can share my screen, and those who can't access can just look at the shared screen and follow along.
Great idea. First 27 in are good. The rest, but you can write in chat or Q&A. Chat. Write in chat your thoughts, your questions, what you've learned. So anyone who's not in, do you want to add? We can add some of your thoughts into this. Joel, you'll have to do the adding since I can add too. We can both add from what we hear. See you on chat. So anyone write in chat something they'd like to add after you do some research?
And I'll add in, also start Googling. If there's any solutions, you can go to this slide on the Jamboard, number 4, 5, and 6, and you can put in what you think the solutions might be.
So the Jamboard's filling up. So other questions on solutions too, if you want to put in chat, we're grabbing some stuff from chat and throwing it in there.
I think this is the first interactive Zoom that I've been a part of. This is really interesting to watch and see people start populating the board there.
Someone's really being a teacher's supportive here. Plant more trees. That's great lead in. Thank you.
Ryan, do you remember what the question that we got about trees was from our webinar 2 weeks ago?
I don't. No, I'm sorry.
I don't off the top of my head either.
Ooh, a good one from Abby Halls. Hope I said that right. It's in there. Thanks, Candace. Get rid of the houses. I like that.
Interesting, we're seeing a lot more issues about why forests are dying than solutions.
Yeah, well, we're going to get some solutions here in the... Thanks, Cynthia. Cynthia. All right. How are we feeling? We got enough input? We can go on? All right, so you can keep playing for those of you that stay in there, but we'll jump back into the PowerPoint and I'll start sharing again. Thank you. And we'll go back to those probably at the end to see if we can do the discussion and might prop some questions. All right, so here we go. We've got some stuff in the Jamboard. We'll review that at the end. So now we're going to see what we're doing with the Forest System Migration Project. Is it working? So we've had some really good partners along with our partnership. We're working with SFA from Greater Mille Lacs Lake, University of Minnesota Duluth, Julie Edison, Brianna Gross, and of course the Nature Conservancy with Meredith as our champion there. So the fundamental problem is this is a typical scene along the North Shore, and I'm sure you've seen some of these in your own areas. The forests are sick, actually. And I've kind of poo-pooed these changes myself. I've got 120 acres, and I'm like, nah, it's not going to be that bad. But now with the forests, with the firs and the spruce dying, and we're beginning to see more and more grasses, this is becoming a problem. So the forecast is, the correct answer is B, which is we're going to be moving more towards the Dodge County model of grasslands and trees in pockets. That's where the forecast is, and that's not too far away, 50 years. So some of us will still be here. What's going on in the forest? Well, we have a huge decline happening right now. Aspen, birch, spruce, and fir, which make up a good chunk of our forests, are in decline with the current changes. But with research, we're also able to see that there's others are doing better. Red maple, white pine, bur oak, and basswood, and things like that, plus some fringe species that might make up the future forests. So one of our challenges is, how do we address these this shift, because it's happening so fast. And so we're going to talk to you about three things. We're going to talk about tree seed collection, growers network, and tree seedling sales. Because basically, these are the steps we're taking to see if what we can do, at least our part of the pie, on dealing with maintaining the canopy of the forest. So I'm going to turn it over to Joel.
Yeah, I can give a little color commentary on tree seed collection. This is really the backbone of the project because we're going to need diverse seed from southern populations, and I did a little bit this fall, so we can talk a little bit about that. Kind of the research background on this is Meredith Cornett from the Nature Conservancy and Julie Ederson. They've done research on red oak tree seed, and what they did was they took tree seed from central and southern Minnesota, planted those red oak acorns up here in the Northeast, and planted them next to northern red oak acorns. And what they found is that the southern seed actually grew faster and healthier than the northern seed. So yeah, basically the forest is just hasn't adapted fast enough to the warming weather. It's warming so fast it can't keep up. The overall idea, we want to get tree seed from southern Minnesota, central Minnesota, planted up here. We also want genetically diverse seed. So we're going to try to get it from a lot of different parents. I did some of the collection this fall. It's super fun. You got to get down there on your hands and knees, and it's honestly kind of addicting. You know, I was like, get up on the ladder with this long pole, swaying up there, and you're just trying to reach for that very last, the last tree seed, the last catkin at the end of the branch. It's kind of fun. We had a good crew of. Can you go back? Yeah, we had a good crew of foresters, UMD grad students, and we've got about 200,000 seeds now. In the cooler there at UMD. So waiting for spring, we're going to plant them. This list here, these were kind of all the species that might be doing better in a warmer climate. The ones in red are the seeds that we went for this fall. And I can talk a little bit more about those species. The northern red oak, this is probably our biggest collection. We've got about 90,000 acorns. And you can see there on the range map, red oak is already up here. But it's a little less common, and we're going to try to get genetics from central Minnesota and plant them up here. Just got a bit of bur oak. You can see bur oak's really cool. They have these cute little caps on the acorns. And we got just a bit of white oak too, so we'll be planting that. We were really, really lucky to get yellow birch. A lot of counties and tribal governments up here are really excited about yellow birch. It's a beautiful tree. You can see the seeds are really tiny. So in like a pound of yellow birch seed, there might be 500,000 seeds, a lot of seed. And the cool thing about yellow birch is if you snap off a twig, it smells like wintergreen. Kind of the bread and butter of the project is white pine. We've got a lot of white pine seeds. A lot of white pine up here now, should be a lot in the future too, so that's our bread and butter. Next year, we're hoping to kind of set up a seed collector network through the SFA, and the idea is we're going to have a Sustainable Farming Association farmers collect some of these seeds on their woodlots and then sell them up here to the northern growers. The idea is we'll give them another source of income and try to make this kind of the fabric of the projects, try to make a system out of it.
So once we have the seeds, we've worked on building a farm and forest growers network. So the idea is to localize that economy, bring those dollars back here that are going for sales of tree seedlings. Right now, they're mostly being bought from Canada and other big operations not in Minnesota for many of our tree seedlings. And so what we're working with our different collaborators, building a team, trying to get the list and recruit the farmers. And we had 3 of the UMD students from last year. Some of you might know them. They worked on the project, identifying farmers, talking with them about the project so we could take it to that next step and see who might be interested. Well, we ended up with 37 growers that were interested. Some have decided they don't want to do it. Some more have been added to this list, but we all are trying to do this training. So you can see the concentration. There's a big group around Finland and a big group in the Aiken area that will be doing a lot of the seed growing this year into the tree seedlings. So we had training. Joel set us up with some great speakers from around the country and to talk about how do you grow in containers? How do you grow bare root? What's the business plan look like? How do you collect seeds? And we'll be doing more on seeds in training. So for Northeast, we're looking at 6 to 10 growers for this pilot project, growing up to 60,000 tree seedlings, researching and experimenting on how to grow them in our area. We're going to be growing them in high tunnels and greenhouses. And then tree seed collection. The idea is to have these other farmers do the collecting for us. And actually some of our farmers in the north can collect seed for Canada, which is also interested in this climate forward seed. So it's a whole statewide seed collection process. Spring, planting acorns, white pine, getting them all in. We're planting them in 1-inch plugs and 1.5-inch plugs that the Nature Conservancy is willing to plant. And you know, everything from greenhouse container growing, fertilizer, bare root, all the stuff we need to know. So for the project, the farmers have a timeline of collecting seed. In the winter, we're taking orders, working with the county, soil and water districts, working on training new farmers into the operation. Spring, planting, doing all the work. Summer, growing them out. Fall, hopefully we can sell some tree seedlings in the fall, but otherwise we have to figure out how to store them and from the fall through the winter and collect the seeds for the next cycle. So it's an annual cycle, but it's a 50-year project that probably will be active in hopefully getting it self-sustaining within 5 years.
Yeah, so we've got the seed collection happening. We've got the farmers growing those seeds and little seedlings. And the last thing is we got to sell those seedlings to agencies that actually do the reforestation up here. And I'll just talk a little bit about that. You can go to the next slide. So again, Nature Conservancy has been a super important partner on this. They said that next spring, actually spring of 2022, they'll buy 40,000 seedlings at a really good price. So they've been a huge help. Other potential partners include county forestry departments, Carleton County, Itasca County. I've talked about buying a few thousand trees. We're also hoping to sell to soil and water conservation districts. David's been talking with the North Shore Forest Collaborative, selling to some of those landowners. And then the last thing is we'll probably just sell directly to private landowners. And we'll do that through an open source selling system called Open Food Network. And basically it's a way of aggregating orders. And then our growers can sell directly through the system to the private landowners. So it's just a good way to get the trees out there. This is what the trees will look like when we're actually delivering them. On the left there are the plugs. And the first year, most of our trees are going to be those plugs. They're grown in those little cups and they're really tight, easy to ship, and they're nice and shallow, so they're easy to plant in thin soil up here. On the right there, you've got the bare root seedlings. In the future, we might be growing those. Those are just planted straight into the ground and kind of grown like a normal crop. And those are good if you like grow 1 year in the greenhouse and then 1 year outside. The tree gets a little bigger, so maybe private landowners like that. And yeah, we're just about wrapping up, but I thought I'd show you our website here. Just want to thank Arrowhead Grown for letting us use a webpage. And you can go there, you can look at some of the trainings we recorded for the farmers, look at resources on how to grow trees. So thank you very much. And I think we're just ending, we'll just have a little poll and then open Q&A.
Okay, here comes the last poll. And this is really just attendee opinions. And then also, as folks are finishing up adding to the poll, please put in your questions into the chat. We've got at least one to start with. So we would love to have some more to throw out to our panelists to dive a little deeper into their content, because I know that was like drinking from a fire hose with all the information they just shared with us. So. Give people a couple more seconds, finish the poll. Nobody thinks you need to find new jobs, which is good.
Yes.
All right, well, we'll finish that up.
I'm glad to see more people said absolutely than not going to work. So
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, so the first question that I see is from Tim. Do healthy forests need brush fires and or timber harvesting to have a healthy forest?
Yes, and you know, one of the things as we were talking to the counties and other foresters is, you know, the whole question: what's climate change? What's other factors? And so, you know, as you talk about this, I think of climate change as kind of just one more layer of challenge to an already challenged forest. And whether it's, you know, and we heard from foresters, especially the younger forests, that were saying all those older foresters did a terrible job in managing the forest. But, you know, how they managed, we've had a limited burn type program. Some tree species, it's essential. They have to burn to seed, like jack pine. And so fire is very important, but how it has happened in the past with smaller fires over periods of time throughout the whole forest, they were cooler, they were smaller. Now with climate change and extremes, that adds another layer to that fire management. So fires are very important to the forests. Alan Haney, who was a researcher years ago, studied the need for forest fires and how that all worked with his students. Very important issue.
I guess a question from Candace about or maybe it's a response to kind of thoughts about how can we solicit more volunteers to help plant, and an idea that she said she's curious about getting high school students involved. It looks like you had a lot of college students. Maybe you could talk about how people might be able to connect if they have ideas or ideas that you already are in place that people might want to engage with.
I can throw out one idea. I actually just had a meeting with AmeriCorps people from the state of Minnesota, and they're starting something called Forestry Corps, which is placing volunteers, not all college grads, I think some high school grads too, throughout the state, and they'll be working on forestry projects. So I think as that program takes off, that's probably a good way to tap into volunteer labor to plant trees.
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone's heard of crop mobs, where a whole gang of people will come from an urban area and go out to a farm and just glean the field of all the things that fell on the ground, and they'll harvest a whole bunch. Often that'll go to food pantries, but we could do a tree planting mob and just hit an area because we have it like the North Shore Forest Collaborative. There's a lot of older people who own properties that want to really build this new forest. So being able to, you know, kind of have like a forest SWAT team, go out into the woods and do that. It's hard work, but you feel good at the end of the day, mostly. So.
All right, the next question. What about unintended consequences of transplanting southern trees up north where insects, et cetera, may be different? And I think I kind of asked you this question a couple weeks ago, so hopefully you guys got a good answer ready for this one.
Yeah, I think that's a huge concern. You know, for example, they planted honey locust along the Mississippi down in Aiken County, and right now it's not a problem. But in the future, as the climate warms, you don't know. I mean, it could become invasive like it has down south. I think one important thing to note is that all the species seeds we're gathering right now and planting right now are already native up here. Red oak, white pine, yellow birch, they're already native. A big point of the project is just to get southern genetics and also get more diverse genetics.
And that's a good point. You know, we are looking at those edge species. And so we pulled together a panel of experts to try and guide us. So we have a whole species slideshow with the green trees, and those are the ones that are here, and we just want to expand the genetics for a better growth in the future. But then there's a whole bunch of yellow, green light, yellow light, which are ones that other foresters think, yeah, this would be a good idea. They're within 250 kilometers and other things. And then there's the red ones, and those are much further south that may not, a little concerned about doing. So we are looking at that because we don't want to create problems with solutions. And so much of our work in the past is we'll solve one problem and then we end up with another problem. And so we're really trying to be very deliberate and very systematic and science-based for that determination.
Great.
There's another question that may relate to a fair number of people on this call about, just say you're in town or you just have a yard that has only space for 1 or 2 trees. I know you talked about different volunteer opportunities that were looking to be developed, but is there anything like a landowner can do with a small space? In addition, the person asked about, what about if you're on the edge, either the southern edge or more of the front line of the edges? Is there some things unique that those landowners should be mindful of, or things that they can do to help contribute to your project?
Yeah, edge, you know, people who are in like Pine County, Aiken County, they provide a great opportunity to kind of get that first wave of the next wave of trees. So they're already at the edge of some of the species that are moving, that are hemlocks in Carleton County. There's other trees that are just moving in, but too slowly for the changing conditions. So, you know, Aiken's going to have certain combination of trees. The North Shore is going to have different one with the lake. So that's really important. But in terms of like private homes, you know, picking even a species like a red oak and putting it in there, that's great. If you want an evergreen, you could try a hemlock. You know, so it depends what you want, you know, whether you want to get hit by acorns when you're out there in the fall or what. I know we've started talks with several different small towns, city officials, and they're like, all our ash have died, all our trees have died in all the cities. And so we're not only encouraging them to use these climate forward species, but encouraging them to diversify, not by block, but within blocks. And, you know, they would do whole neighborhoods, 1 tree species. So diversifying the types and within the blocks. And so I think, you know, whether you're in an urban spot or, you know, a rural spot, you can help out. And those trees that you plant in 15 to 20 years are going to be seed trees. So they could be the future seed trees. So your 1 oak could be the mother or father of a great future for red oaks all across Northeast Woods. So
Nice. We've got lots of great questions. I'm glad we've got so much time. So one from the chat from Jackson: how big of a factor is the soil condition when it comes to forest depletion? And to follow up, what is the best way to get nutrients back into the soil if possible? And Jackson, you have no idea how big of a soil enthusiast David is. So hopefully we've got an expert here.
I'm so happy you're talking about soils, you know, and that's one of the consideration Nature Conservancy has, is they don't want too long a plug because it gets hard to plant in our rocky soils. So, you know, there's a lot of different things with soils. Basically, the best way is to keep everything that comes from the trees and the duff all as the next generation of soil building. It takes 1,000 years to create an inch of soil in those forests. And so it's very important that we also manage for fire well, because some of the fires have burnt off the organic matter on the top of the soils. So these big, you know, hot fires are not good for soil. You know, in terms of forest soil, I can talk to you a whole bunch about agriculture at another time, but forest soils, it's really just making sure as we pull trees from it, we can return, especially on a home scale, you can return the ash back to the forest. You can return some of the nutrients back, but also that we leave the branches, we leave some of the organics there to maintain the soil health. Also, they're doing experiments with biochar, which is basically the anaerobically burned wood, like that clumps you have after a campfire, the stuff that didn't quite burn. That's proving to be quite good to be actually a fertilizer for the forest that does not only nutrient retention, but also carbon sequestering. So all of those things can be part of a whole healthy look at soils.
So there's another question that's a little bit, I mean, it's specific to this project, but I think it's very transferable or applicable to a lot of these challenges that we're facing with climate change. And the question came from Lucy is, how did this process get from recognizing that this is a problem to actually organizing and getting things coordinated to actually, you know, have what you presented today? Like, what did that look like? And where are the people who noticed the problem? Are they the same people who are working on the project now? Are they still involved? Or can you talk a little bit of, and I think this really gets to, like, we have these really complex, difficult, wicked problems, and how we see something's wrong. How do you get coordinated to figure out what the plan is, and who's involved with those discussions, noticing to actually implementation?
Yeah, the good thing is we have, I know working with Joel, having young, brilliant, go-getters people are going to help change the world for the better. And so we have a lot of people ready to do that. So one, you need the champions. But the way this started was, you know, I went to a presentation by Meredith and Julie Edison, Meredith Cornett, about how this challenge is coming to the forest. And they were naming bottlenecks, seeds, and getting the trees of those diverse tree species like basswood, yellow birch. There are two bottlenecks. I was like, oh, we can figure that out. And so working with the Sustainable Farming Association, we just got everyone together. What was different about this gathering, because this issue has been known for years, this challenge has been on the horizon, but it hasn't been until recently that the average forester or county, they haven't really been ready to do anything about it because it's not quite as clear that it's going to be a problem. But what's changed in the last decade from talking with people 10 years ago and now is everyone's ready to do something now because they're like, we have to do something. It's changing too fast. It's evident. And so I think things are converging. It has to happen. As for which species get brought into our area, still under great debate. But they would have never talked about that 10 years ago, not even a discussion point. So the issue has come to a crux enough, so it's risen that up. And the people just getting together from multi-disciplines to solve these problems, because none of these big problems can be solved by any one person or any one organization. We've got 30 different organizations tapping into this and being connected with this, and over 200 people now that are involved in it. So it's going to take a lot, but it's going to take persistence. We're going to need to be persistent about it. So I see some great things, and it'll take more commitment. Minnesota Power buys trees and offers trees. We need to get them to buy these climate forward trees. We need to get more orders from the Nature Conservancy and the counties. So it can grow, but this is the start. And the farmers now have to be able to grow these seedlings. So we're going to grow a lot of extra just in case we mess up a little, because we want to make sure we meet that demand the first year, so that maybe next year the Nature Conservancy will order 80,000 or eventually 600,000 from the Nature Conservancy. And that would really shift. Imagine all those extra trees growing into the forest with these broader genetics that will provide seed trees for the future.
Excellent. I've got two questions I'm going to try to combine here because I think they're related, from Sam and from Barbara, kind of asking about partnerships with local and regional agencies, recognizing that there are relationships going, but what Sam was asking are their relationships with statewide or federal agencies like the DNR, U.S. Forest Service, outside of Forest Corps that was just mentioned, And then Barbara was asking specifically if we're in talks with the Duluth City Forester. And then folks keeping in mind that, you know, this is the whole Northeast region, so like 10 counties. So not just Duluth, but obviously we are maybe the biggest city in the region. So
I can just talk super short about the Duluth question. I think our focus right now is mostly in counties and the Nature Conservancy. And I haven't talked to the Duluth City Forester, but I do know that the Duluth City has a Forestry Corps member there. So I think that's definitely a connection we can make in the future.
Yeah, Joel's been keeping me busy. He's connected us with every forest department by counties throughout Northeast Minnesota. And now we're halfway through the soil and water districts. So making some of those connections, but Joel's also done a lot of lead work on connecting us with the state DNR and some of these bigger entities that are not only help us, get connected with the future of the forestry and where we're moving, but also with helping us find trainers to train the farmers how to grow these. So, you know, we had Potlash tree grower director who used to grow 7 million trees every year. He's on a call. So there's some really good cooperation happening in a way that is happening way better than I was hoping for. So there seems to be a readiness to work together and solve these problems together.
This is good. So I know that especially my interactions with you, David, you're champion. Like, you really are excited and happy to like figure out, okay, this needs to get solved. Let's get it solved. And let's figure it out. And a question that came from Teresa Bertosi is, what are the criticisms? What would be some concerns that people bring up in terms of discussions about forest assisted or just assisted migration in general? But I think we're specifically focusing on forests today, that students should be aware of and engaging with these topics maybe later in their communities with other landowners, different people that they care about. What should they be mindful of that people, might be challenging back on the idea of what we're working on here?
Well, I can start. Yeah, I think one thing is the language about climate change. That can be off-putting for some. And I've interacted with lots of different people, and some don't even, don't believe it's going to get warmer or it's changing, and that's okay, because they also know as tree growers or foresters, I say, okay, whether it's going to get warmer, colder, drier, wetter, we don't really know which areas are going to get what. But we do know broadening the genetics that are planted in our area will serve whatever happens. Because as long as you have good, diverse genetics, good, diverse varieties, whether it's going to be warmer or colder, it doesn't matter. It's providing an opportunity. I think the biggest pushback we get is when we're talking about species that aren't currently here that might need to be here for the future forests. And I think that's the biggest pushback, and that's why we're working with that criteria of what species we bring in. I will say every single person that's pushed back, at the end of my conversation, I'll ask them, so if you were to plant a tree that's not here, what would you plant? And they have lists. We actually tabulated that list and then presented it to the panel of experts to determine which ones they thought were appropriate to bring. But there's a bunch on the list that foresters that were a little negative about this suggested that we're too conservative to include in our green light or yellow light list. So I think it just has to be done. I think how we language around climate change, at this point, we're working with the counties. And so that's discussions about availability, and they get it. And most of them get the idea that the forest is struggling. And it's hard when you watch something you love, like the forest, in whatever capacity you are, whether you're just a homeowner, just watching, all your firs around you die. It's just hard. And, you know, I would like to see a forest canopy, you know, in 50 years. I won't get to see it, but Joel will, and some of you will, and your kids will, and my kids will. So I think it's incumbent on us to be persistent, to keep going. We're not in the short game. And I think that also is reassuring, because as we struggle along the way, we're like, well, we'll get more next year. We'll get more farmers on where we have more demand, but we only want to build it systematically so it can sustain itself and not dependent on grants. So we want to make it into the economic model. But we need great partners like the Nature Conservancy that are supporting us in that effort, making it happen.
Excellent. You mentioned, you know, dead firs, and a question from Joel here is, we've got a tremendous amount of standing dead balsam. Is there any sort of use for this material that would make it feasible to harvest? It's a concern of it accumulating as fuel, so when a fire does rip through, that we're just letting tinder sit.
It's a huge potential nightmare. I just became one of the supervisors in the Lake County Soil and Water District, and there's 100 projects they're working on in the Forest Department just on that issue. So, you know, ideally, if your tree like isn't dead yet, 70%, 80% will be dead. So if you have a use of it in a good live form, you know, where the wood might be used for saw, you know, saw logs or other things, poles, it might be a good time to use that. We're going to be spending a lot of the next decade on our 120 acres clearing out all of the dead firs so that we don't have a massive fire through here, because the big change in our canopy over the, you know, last big spruce budworm invasion has been the immense amount of spruce and fir that are in the forest now. And spruce budworm gets the fir even better than the spruce. And so it's a major issue. So if you can find uses, I'm going to be cutting a lot and making firewood, but it's terrible firewood. It's punky, especially after it's died. It's very light. It burns in, you know, minutes. But, you know, also some poles. So I would contact soil and water districts in your county, the foresters, and ask if there can be some cost share dollars. There can be some assessment for some of these places. Yeah, it's a major challenge.
So I want to be mindful of time here and stuff. We have a number of other great questions, but before we move forward, I want to, if there's stuff that we haven't touched on, or Jonna, if that you kind of had a plan as kind of a wrapping up, that we leave adequate time for that. So I'm going to just kind of pause here to kind of get some guidance from the rest of you.
I think we've got time for maybe 2 more questions before we wrap up. So let's see, maybe I'm gonna throw up Carol's question, and then Ryan, if you want to do Candace's as a last wrap up, because that will be a nice way to kind of tie things off. So Carol is asking, what are the effects of water quantity and quality? And without more context, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say, you know, like, if something happens to our water, is there an impact on the forest? But we're also in northern Minnesota getting more precipitation with climate change. So is that impacting the forest? Will it impact the future forest that we are planting? Has that been taken into consideration?
Right. And I think what goes into that formula too is that there's different types of trees in our forest. The evergreens will collect snow and then meter off the spring runoff. So changing composition between evergreen and deciduous is a major issue. And that's our concern. A lot of the next species coming up are not evergreens. They are more in the deciduous family. So changing that profile is something to consider. That's why we're really looking at a species that comes near us, but is a northern cedar, which is, you know, not in our area, but it's an evergreen. So white pine also should be doing better, because parts of our area, like the Iron Range, might even be drier in some of the scenarios. So the white pine will do better with that. The warmer weather will do a little better for the white pine. And so again, we're going to be growing white pine. I think it's an important mix. White cedar along the North Shore. So trying to make sure that composition, but the best thing for water is a good, healthy, diversified forest. And so if we can achieve that, the runoff, the drainage, the filtration of the soil, all of the rest will go better. And that's what the goal is, build that diversity, build that integrity, the roots holding the soil, everything rich. Right now we have a sick forest. That's why the grasses are coming, to try and take up that light, and that will help a little bit with moisture, but we want the forest to do it because we want to have a forest. So that's all I can say about that. It's integral to our water system, forests up here. It's everything.
That's great. Yeah, a lot to think about. So one of the things I guess we're looking to wrap up, like what's progress look like? How are you measuring progress? Like what's success? How is that measured? How often? And then how can people support success? You know, how can people support your work?
Well, I can start. I think, well, helping the Nature Conservancy continue to work with us, you know, giving them donations and saying, hey, for that forest project, that would be great. Because they're key in building this whole system. And so I think that's really, really important to support the organizations doing that. Yeah, so I guess I would just say, you know, get involved as much as you can. There's so many issues. Figure out what your issue is and do your piece of the pie really, really well. And then we'll do our piece of pie, because success will look like a forest canopy in 50 years, not grasses like is predicted. Success would look like farmers bringing in income, growing climate forward trees for all the trees, all the 9 million trees planted every year, not just 40,000, not just 600,000, but millions of trees. The success would be, you know, more and more organizations like the Nature Conservancy jumping in and saying, we want to do that too. And we're going to make sure it's paid enough that the farmers can do this. And we can build that sustainable, resilient community supporting the work. Yeah, Joel?
I just add, at kind of a ground level, one of the cool things, one of the unusual things about this project is that we can track a seed right from where it's collected to right to where it's planted in the end. And a lot of times, especially with the bigger grow operations in Canada, they'll just get a bunch of seed, they'll plant it, and then they'll get it back. You don't really know where it came from. When we went out and collected, we got GPS coordinates for every seed. We've got them in a spreadsheet. We'll keep track of where those batches go to the farmers. Then when the farmers sell them to the reforestation agencies, if those agencies want to keep track of that, they have that information right there.
We could start an adopt a tree program. Yeah, support, you know, for landowners to help buy these climate forward species, you know, would be great. Get them more available. It's a great project, and it's just so much fun to see everyone working together to do this, because it's involving everyone. And so, yeah, I just encourage to find your place in that, whether it's forestry or water or soils and agriculture. So, but for trees, yeah, join one of the links in that process, because it's a whole network of groups, people, decisions, or grow some trees yourself. Let us know.
And I just want to reiterate, in case people missed it, that there are already 9 million trees being planted per year in just northeastern Minnesota. Is that right?
Yeah, there's millions and millions and millions.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not like you guys are starting from scratch. We already have tree planting programs, there are already things happening. So just thinking about shifting those species a little bit. good thing to think about and realize that there's a lot of stuff going on out in the forest already. So yeah, so just to do a final wrap up, I just want to thank everybody who joined us and stuck it out to the end and asked such great questions. That was really a really enjoyable Q&A to kind of moderate and pick through. And sorry if we missed your question or didn't get to it, but there was a lot in there. David and Joel, thank you for sharing about the project. And
we'll look at the Jamboard. So we'll have fun playing with that. Thank you for those thoughts.
Awesome. And Ryan's got our contact information up there. So if you want to connect with either of us more directly, you can do that via email or on social media. And our next program is going to be Wednesday, February 17th at 3 p.m. this time for microplastics and microbrews. So we've got a UMD professor and a local business owner of the co-owner of the Bent Paddle Brewery to talk about microplastics and water and the impact on a product that uses our local water. So I hope you will join us for that one. Ryan, you're muted.
Just saying thank you. Making it through. Yeah, this is really great. I really appreciate everyone. If anyone has questions that need to follow up with David or Joel, you can reach out to us or reach out to the websites that they referenced, and look forward to seeing you all again in a couple weeks.
All right, thanks everyone. Goodbye.